Welcome to In Conversation with Brad Wendes. I've got a fantastically interesting guest for us today. I've got Richard Bland. I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to let Richard tell us just a little bit about himself. So, Richard, who are you? What do you do?
I am just a man. My name is Richard. Born and bred Colchester. Was an actor for most of my life. Then COVID decided that wasn't a thing anymore, so I thought what actually does make me happy, because acting wasn't necessarily making me happy, but I did love to tell stories, and I loved working with actors, so I trained as a director instead. Over the years, directed several shows, produced several shows, performed in several shows. I guess what I like to sort of encompass myself now is a theatre maker and actor trainer.
All right, so let's start at the beginning then. How did you get into theatre? What prompted your love of theatre in the first place? I imagine you were yay big and...
Yeah, just a fraction shorter than I am now. But honestly, when I was little, I wanted to be a pilot. Really desperate to be a pilot, and then first time I had an eye test, they told me that my eyesight would mean that I wasn't able to be a pilot. Devastating at 8 years old. But then my auntie took me to see my first ever theatre show at Theatre Royal Norwich, and it was a production of The Hobbit. And I dare say if I watched it now, I'd think it was terrible, but at the time, it started my love of Tolkien and my love of theatre. I was just totally enraptured by as far as I was concerned, the absolute magic that was going on stage. So I came back from Norwich to Colchester, saw my parents, and I said, please send me to a drama club. Stagecoach, I come from a very big family. There's 6 of us, and so not an awful lot of money growing up. Couldn't afford Stagecoach, couldn't afford several of the other groups around, and then the Headgate Theatre had a kids group called Cats, run by Sarah Young, which at the time was about £5 a session. And I started there and then carried on going there for about 10 years until I was 18. Tried to get involved in every piece of theatre I possibly could before then desperately trying to get into drama school. Tried for 4 years, 30 auditions, and £3,000 later, finally got in. It's always just been a case of grasping at as many opportunities as possible, and when there are none, or when you're hitting your face against a brick wall, making them for myself, which is what I've tried to do.
That's a great ethos to have. What I found speaking to people, and certainly I've taught at drama schools, I've met a lot of drama students, there is an absence of the working class and the poor, for want of a better example. In drama schools, it is still seen as kind of a middle class or something you do if you can afford to, because there's going to be a lot of periods of time out of work, and how do you manage that if mummy and daddy aren't paying for everything? But I have to say, some of the most competent and driven actors I've ever met have been from working class backgrounds. Just as a slight aside, there was a guy who was from I think like Leeds or Sheffield, somewhere north, who was at East 15, and he auditioned for East 15 on the acting and stage combat course. Never done any acting before, and he was had no idea what to go in. He even didn't know what a classic monologue was. He had to ask a lot of questions about what a lot of Shakespearean language he'd never heard before. He was really like your blank canvas. He was a phenomenal actor. He came in and he just wanted it. And the school had said, while we've got a lot of work to do, here we have not just a blank canvas, but someone that wants this so bad. And this guy went on. He was working straight out of drama school. Was working in the Globe. He was like he was the fight captain for the Globe for a whole season, and actually got a really good career working and doing far more classic and period pieces than modern work. And he was like the guy that wanted to be an action movie star, and just found this love of Shakespeare and love of the classics. Like, that's amazing.
Well, I mean, there's something to be said for that actually making you so much more in tune with what, especially in the classics, with what Shakespeare was trying to do. He was writing theatre for the working classes, and he was telling stories that were universal, stories that you aren't supposed to be studied, that are supposed to be lived.
Interesting, actually, since we're kind of on something of a tangent. I was listening to a podcast this morning on my way over here about sort of some of the issues that Hollywood's facing at the moment, and the person speaking was the Critical Drinker. I don't know if you're familiar with the Critical Drinker.
No.
He's a great kind of film critic, Scottish guy, very angry, love him, and he was saying some of the problem is the budgets.
Yeah.
Because there's so much money in Hollywood. You've got, The Rock is just asked for $50 million for this next film he's in. How is that film ever going to make money? because if his fee is that, then he's got the entourage and the gym and the trainers and all of the hangers-on that come with being a massive movie star.
Yeah.
You know, we're pushing movies up into 250, 300, 350 million dollars. You've then got a marketing budget on top of that. You've got a movie that's got to take, you know, close to $1 billion at the box office just to break even. And we're living in a world where that second wind of DVD sales doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
So once it's kind of done its thing in the box office and it goes into streaming services, it's very hard to track what the value of that film is, because things that maybe didn't do well in the cinema and have then had a massive boost in DVD sales, you've kind of got a second opening weekend. So now there's too much money, and that's why movie studios just aren't taking any risks anymore. You'd never get another Rocky, you'd never get another Rambo. I'm not saying they are the best films ever made, but you know, you've got a very low budget film that's been very critically acclaimed, that someone's just gone into a studio and gone, how about this? Kevin Smith, how would he ever make Clerks again? It's just not going to happen.
Well, I mean, you say we'll never get a Rocky or another Rambo, but all that's being made at the moment are prequels, sequels, and origin stories. So we might not get another Rocky, but we'll definitely get his manager, the backstory, or, you know.
No, you're absolutely right, and that's why Hollywood are playing it so safe, because the budgets are so high. They're like, well, people like Toy Story, right? We'll just dust that off and do another one of those.
Buzz Lightyear did not need an origin story. It wasn't necessary.
And they're not selling because people are, you know, people talk about the politics and the modern agendas and things in film, and I think there's an element of that, and I think probably there's a cross section of the society that might be like, well, I'm going to watch that film before I let my kids see it. It's going to be on Disney Plus in a couple of weeks anyway. We're not going to go to cinema. I don't know that's such a massive problem, but poor storytelling, poor writing, lazy writing is definitely prevalent.
And quick writing.
And we've heard reports from studios like Disney where they're scrapbooking movies, so they'll film the same scene 3 or 4 different times with slight changes, and then put it together in the edit, and it shows, you know. And then you've got a film that's not the best film ever made that needs to make $1 billion at the box office just to break even.
But they rely on the formula. It's the same with the Marvel films as well. Now, I love Marvel, but there's undeniably a formula. You could play those films on top of each other, and play by play, beat by beat, will be identical. They're resting and relaxing on this formulaic form of storytelling, but what that does is that it stops cinema being exciting. And that's kind of why I'm an advocate for theatre, because it's always lived. It's always a living, breathing thing that you're watching in the theatre. They could never... I don't think you could ever fall into a formula with theatre in the same way that cinema has. I also sort of rest on the fact that theatre's been going since the Greeks, like, you know, and pre.
So, if it ain't broke.
Yeah.
And I have to agree with you. So, in my own personal experience, I wanted to work in film. I wanted to be a stuntman. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to work in film. I wanted to be on this side of the camera, doing cool stuff. And I worked hard. I didn't go to drama school. I taught at drama schools, but I didn't go to drama school. I went in and did extra work and just signed up and said, yes, I'll do that to anything I could. And while I wasn't from a wealthy background, I did have parents who were very supportive, which was helpful, very helpful, you know, and we struggled and it was difficult, but I was able to get myself on film sets and things. And the last film that I worked on in a performance capacity was 28 Weeks Later. And I'm like, this is it, you know, I'm a zombie on 20 Weeks Later, I'm getting blown up, and this is amazing. I am so unbelievably bored and cold, and is this what I want to do? And then I got involved, you know, through the same circles in theatre, and I just realised I had that, as you alluded to, the immediacy of theatre. So if you're directing a piece of theatre and you say, oh, actually, could you just do that a little bit differently? And they do, and you see it, and then when you perform to an audience, you get that immediate reaction. You know whether it's worked or not within seconds, and that's scary. And there's an adrenaline that comes with that, and you can't equal that in film. I mean, there's a lot of money in film, but you know, you do something. You're like, is that going to make the final cut? How's it going to be? Like, how's it going to look? We might film it 3 or 4 times. I don't know which take they're going to use. Whereas in the theatre, I'm like, yeah, that works. Do that again. Do that every night. And every night there's a slight change because you've got real people walking around and they're having to dynamically shift what they're doing because maybe someone was not quite on their mark. Or it's just brilliant. Like, you can't beat live theatre.
There's a lot to be said for the audience's part in theatre as well. Like, you know when you go to see a show, you are only ever going to see what happens that night once. It's not immortalized. That is just for you. And actually, to quote Marvel, a vision in, I think it's Age of Ultron, a thing is not beautiful because it lasts. Like, it is so... There is something electric about theatre that I don't think film will ever be able to capture. Don't get me wrong, Lord of the Rings, I think it comes very close, and I love movies, but for me, the feeling I get after leaving an auditorium after a good show, or a bad one, so it's still live, it's still immediate. I still felt, arguably, if a show makes you angry, it's just as
Well, it's still an emotional reaction.
Yeah.
It absolutely is. It's created an emotional reaction. So you were talking about watching theatre and being inspired.
Yes.
My pet hate in theatre, and it's a really minor thing, my pet hate in theatre, whether it be amateur community or professional theatre, is bad scene changes.
Yes.
If you see a bloke wander on and move a piece of set, I'm watching him. I hate it. I really hate it. I also don't really love curtain down. You can hear wheels scraping around behind a curtain.
It's lazy. It's lazy. It needs to be... Everything that happens on stage is part of the storytelling. So you can't drop the story to then go move some things around and then pick the story. The audience is gone. You've lost them.
And that actually came from my first memorable theatre experience. I would have been tiny, going to see a pantomime with my mum. And I remember being more drawn to these blokes in black humping things around on the stage than what was going on. And I remember that now. I must have been 4 or 5 years old. And I remember that, being in the theatre and watching these guys, being like, what are they doing? And being removed from the magic. So I've hated that ever since. I'm 40 years old now, and I still hate that. I think the best scene changes I've ever seen Come From Away. Have you seen Come From Away?
No, I don't know.
It's phenomenal. You've got a cast of about 10 and 10 chairs. That's it. That's everything. And when they change their physicality, and because it's like they're playing several different characters, they've walked on stage, they haven't said a word, and you know which character it is.
Yeah.
And you'd be hard pressed to think, oh, that's the same guy. And they're seamlessly just picking these chairs up, moving them around in character, and you wouldn't even notice that we've gone from being in an aeroplane to being in a schoolroom to being in an office. It's just phenomenal. And I would aspire to create something that is that clever with such a small amount on the stage. It was phenomenal.
I think what people don't realise is, and a lot of actors don't realise, is that conviction in that, and like, you never want to be apologising for any part of your art on stage, and by having a transition that you're trying to rush through or that you're trying to hide, like, the audience can see you. Like, there is nothing that you're hiding from the audience. So whether that is endowing the movement and then transition with the feel of the previous or the next scene coming, or incorporating it as part of the story, I'm a big fan of having scene changes happen towards the end of a scene, so we go straight into that. There's almost something cinematic about it. Like, we're changing the shot, we're changing the perspective. No, I completely agree with you. And one of my biggest bugbears in theatre, and you'll probably get what I'm talking about. So we're doing a scene, okay? Now, say something to me. Ask me a question.
Hello, Richard. What's your favourite food?
What's my favourite food? Well...
Oh, yeah.
how many times in actual conversation when somebody asks you a question do you turn and look off into the distance? Or if somebody's in a room in a play, essentially what they're doing is looking into the wall. Like, talk to me. Like, we're having the conversation.
So I do a lot of work in opera.
Yeah.
And that is a real operatic convention because there's no mics and they have to sing out.
Yeah.
So I'm a bit more numb to that, but it is a consideration we make. So working with the English National Opera, the staging and the direction are in, it is a conversation because they have to be in a particular position in order to hit those notes. They need to be able to brace and they need to be projecting out. So we have to set the scene around what that person needs. But it's still a consideration. And you're right. And it's not like, this one time I was... And it's a little bit crap. Not an opera, but...
Well, all of a sudden as an audience member, I'm thinking, oh, okay, this is for me.
Yeah.
I'm not privy to this story that's intriguing. Now you're demonstrating rather than being in the moment.
Yeah.
I'm not interested in seeing you pretend to be these. I've come to watch a lived experience. Don't get me wrong, like, a lot of people say that acting's just professional lying. I'm like, well, it's not, actually, because at no point when I'm on stage and you're in the audience do I think, oh my god, they think this is actually happening. Like, I've duped them.
Yeah.
Like, no, it's about achieving truth in the world of the play. So, like, when you talk to me about opera and the need to do that, we as an audience, if we're familiar with opera, or if a good opera has the right effect on someone who's not familiar with opera, we will quickly understand that that's a convention of that world. So absolutely forgivable in those instances. Panto, we know we're going to get spoken to in the audience. But I guess the spheres that I've never worked in opera, I haven't yet had a chance to work professionally in panto. But it's about establishing the rules of the world and not having to give the audience a list of what those are, but having drilled it so much in rehearsal that everybody knows what this world's about, that it just, by osmosis, by the audience being there, they understand the conventions. But for me, in any form of truthful storytelling, naturalistic storytelling, I don't want to see anybody turn their back. In my classes, they were playing a scene, and I would get them to play the scene, and then I'd offer little like sort of tidbits in terms of how to explore it differently. And they were doing a scene from Hedda Gabler, and they were doing very much this sort of dramatic going off to the two sides for the audience. And I said, can you just pretend we're not here for a second? I want you to have this conversation like you're in the playhouse next door. And all of a sudden, everybody who was watching leans forward. Because they're like, oh, there's something we're not supposed to know. This is interesting. Oh, it's like a naughty secret. And it just brought it to life because there was an actual connection on stage as opposed to some sort of cartoon or,
Yeah, and I guess that kind of thing is important. But like you said, you've got to understand the conventions of the medium you're in, because in opera that's accepted, because you expect someone to stand in the middle of the stage and do this and belt at you, because that's a kind of a requirement of the medium. It's jarring if someone does that in a movie, which is supposed to be a very naturalistic. There are exceptions, Alfie being a great one, or Deadpool. These are all exceptions to that, and you accept it because that's part of that world. Mm-hmm. So is your style of directing very naturalistic then? Are you like, there's the scene, fourth wall?
Well, no, that's where I kind of come undone in terms of my integrity. No, that's not true. No, it depends how you define truthful and naturalistic. I like the surreal. I like all my work to have an undercurrent of myth and magic and legends, and because that's what makes the magic of theatre. I love it when a writer puts in a play and then 1,000 eyeballs fill the stage, like with no thought to how the director's going to make that happen. Because I'm like, that's a gift, that's an opportunity. Okay, so what? Let's play in the room and let's find out what that looks like, or let's talk to the designer, find out what that looks like. So I'm a big fan of the surreal and the supernatural, but I think there's an integrity and a truth to that kind of storytelling as well. One of my favourite plays I've ever read, it was This Is Living by Liam Borrett, and that is essentially a contemporary romantic ghost story. It's a beautiful, beautiful play. I would not describe it as naturalistic, but were I to direct it, and I would love to one day, in order for the audience to have the same emotional gut punch that I had reading it, I want that relationship between the husband and the wife to be like true and strong and loving, and so in terms of relationships and the human experience, yes, I lean towards the truthful and the naturalistic, but I am a big fan of subverting expectation in terms of the set and the context in which that's put. I don't know if I've just rambled at you there.
No, I'm really interested in your methods, because I guess let's step back a little bit. I'd be interested in your big influences. Like, what was it, or who was it that drove you? You were interested in theatre from a young age. You got involved in the Headgate, and you got involved with someone local that was running youth theatre. But was there a person or a show or something that made you think, you know what, yeah, I'm in this. This is my thing?
Yeah, I mean, there's a fair few moments over the course of my life where I'm like, yeah, no, I'm definitely doing the right thing. Yep, this is definitely the way I want to go. Cheek by Jowl was a big one, and Declan Donnellan's book, The Actor in the Target. Their renditions of Shakespeare just blow my mind. One of my favourite shows I ever saw was their Winter's Tale. I also watched Accidental Death of an Anarchist by Dario Fo at the Mercury years and years back when they had their rep company. But also American realism has played a big part in my theatre making, and my influences. A View from the Bridge, Crucible, Tennessee Williams, Of Mice and Men, Steinbeck. That was another one I saw at the Mercury years ago, and I was like, I'm in love with theatre. I need to be doing this. I'm always open to new experiences as well, but I have to say, I mean, in terms of cinema as well, Lord of the Rings, sci-fi, fantasy, Marvel have had a massive impact on the way that I do theatre, and I didn't realise it until someone I was on my course with last year. Halfway through the year, they discovered that I love Marvel, and they go, that makes sense. And I'm like, what do you mean? And it's like, you've got a very sort of dynamic, cinematic element to your work. compared to mine.
So you have like a sky beam and a CGI battle at the end of every
yeah,
show.
absolutely, and everyone's in a suit of armour. No, but just in terms of the way I see things and what I want to try and achieve and like cross those mediums. And I'd never considered it before. I'd never considered that was a thing before. And then when they brought it to my attention, I was like, yeah, and actually I quite like that. Yeah, that you know, the whole course was oriented around finding out what your style is, what makes you tick, and who you are as a director. And I think that is a big part of who I am as a director. I like to try and achieve the seemingly impossible, because nothing is impossible.
And I think you've hit the nail on the head, and that's part of what I want to get out of this show is finding people that have come from humble beginnings. It's not offensive, I say,
No.
incredibly working class background, and that's not been an excuse for not doing the things they love. And it's bloody hard work.
Yeah,
you and I can both attest that it's not easy. There are times when I can remember doing really cool things and having some great jobs that I was doing, and walking around the supermarket going, I have £4, do I buy soap or food? You know, these are the lived struggles that we have to follow what we're doing, but you keep going at it, and now I have a business and I'm working in the theatre, and I've got, you know, we've got a house which we own and renovating, and a beautiful little girl, and it's still really bloody hard. Yeah. It's just all of the bills are bigger now. And so that's kind of that struggle, and that how the hell do you do this? How does someone who's like, I really want to do that, and I don't know how because this and this, and so let's jump to tell us a little bit about your course and how you applied for it and how you got there, and maybe some of the ways that you managed to get over. It was Bristol, wasn't it?
Yeah. So basically, I lockdown hit me like it hit the rest of us. I lost 4 jobs in a week. One of those was an acting job, one was a teaching job, one was a restaurant. I think it's Jimmy Carr always says, like, whenever I meet an actor, I always say the same thing to them: I'll have a coffee, please. I've worked in every bar, restaurant and cafe in Colchester, London, Guildford. But no, I got a moment to sort of have a bit of respite, sit back and think, what do I actually want to do? I'm turning 30 this year, and I thought, I love telling stories, I love directing, so I'll just apply for some directing courses. So I applied to Bristol Old Vic, Birkbeck, and a few others, and I got a couple of offers, and I was like, oh, Christy, okay, now I've actually got to pay for this. So I sort of delve into what I've always done, which is, you know, if you want it and if you make it work, like you find it. And I thought, what am I good at? What can I do? So I bought I saved up and bought a cricket machine and a heat press, and so £2,000 for my course was paid for by me printing t-shirts, hoodies, tote bags, theatre themed. But also then businesses started getting involved, like a restaurant called Kintsu asked me for t-shirts for their staff, COS, Cultural Operatic Society, asked me for their hoodies, and, you know, so there was that. But I also, you know, getting creative around fundraising as well. It's much harder at the higher level of money you go, but like in the past I've done prize fight nights like RADA does, so, you know, teaching a bit of stage combat choreography, getting them to put their own scene on it and then performing that. I used to run poetry slams to raise money. I did a thing called a script club, which I have to be very careful I've got my teeth in when I say it, it runs like a book club, except it was a 2-course meal and you'd discuss the play over dinner, and you'd swap tables starter to main. We did a thing called Balloon Wars, which was just people would pledge £2 for every water balloon they want to chuck to my face. You know, and whoever got the most balloon pledges, they got all of the balloons chucked at them. So, you know, like there is creativity to be found in finding funds as well. But I've always had a million jobs. That is a staple. I grew up in a working class family, and a family of 6 no less. And, you know, we couldn't afford an awful lot. We had, you know, all of our shopping was blue and white stripes from Tesco, and our holidays were in Norfolk, and, you know, that's that. But I loved growing up. I think my dad was a massive inspiration to me, because you make it work, you make ends meet, and the fun and the success is what you get out of it, is how you assess it. So I've always been a grafter. So yeah, applying for Bristol Old Vic, I got a phone call the next day, and there I was going in, and then it was a life-changing experience in a number of ways, but mainly because Bristol Old Vic are going in the right direction for the industry. It was a very much collaborative approach to theatre making, and friendly and safe, and it held us. And the aftercare is second to none as well. I can still talk to any tutors or, from there, the connections that you build, and it's had a profound impact on the way that I work with actors and groups of people now, and people in life as well. Always starting from a place of generosity of spirit, time, energy, acknowledging that everyone deserves a base level of respect and trust until that's broken, coming at it from that angle as opposed to assuming everyone's out to get you, which I won't lie is where I was for a while, because I think sometimes when you're an actor and you're living in a world full of judgment, you do start to think, you start to get a bit paranoid. And it was doing that course and coming out the other side of it. I remember being in a rehearsal room and thinking, right, this is the feeling I should have had when I was acting. This is the feeling that actors must have when they're acting, when they're actually... Because I was convinced I just wanted to be an actor for decades. I was like, no, I'm in the right place now. This is what I need to be doing.
Fantastic. And do you still feel that love of directing and teaching, and you're like, this is where I want to be? I mean, I was in the right playground, but maybe not on the right swing kind of thing.
Yeah. Oh, directing and actor training are my life. Like, they give me life. Particularly, getting on my soapbox a little bit here now, but we were talking about the working classes and accessibility. And it's a bugbear of mine that every other theatre is talking about accessibility at the moment, but still charging £4 or more for a Coke behind their bar. And like with my acting classes, for example, it's just about an equality of opportunity for me. There should be no barrier towards creativity and art for anyone. There should always be equality of opportunity to learn about the arts, to train. And I feel like the industry as it is just gatekeeper after gatekeeper after gatekeeper. And 9 times out of 10, that gate stays locked to you because you haven't been able to wow someone in 2 minutes. Like, what kind of... Like, that doesn't nurture art. That sets everybody up against each other, and it's all competitive and cutthroat. And, it can be a really cold and lonely place. And I'm just of the mind now, rightly or wrongly, I'll live and die by this flag, that... It should be about helping each other up the ladder. It should be about collaborative process. It should be about, if somebody comes to me with an idea that they've had, whatever my opinion, art is subjective, whatever my opinion is about the idea, let's help you develop it and see what it becomes.
Accessibility of theatre being important. And I would agree, absolutely agree. So I used to really enjoy going to see pantomimes and things, but I didn't go and see big musicals growing up because they were quite expensive then, and now it's crazy money, Yeah. I've got big props to the English National Opera, who I do a lot of work with. They do free tickets for young people, and they do discounted tickets for under 30s, which sadly neither of us are now eligible for, so we have to pay. So they are making it accessible, but they are a massive company. They have their own issues. I'm sure you're aware of a lot of their budget issues and Arts Council funding cuts and things, but they're a big company. Unfortunately, if you or I hired a theatre and put on a show, we couldn't give free tickets out because unless someone else is paying for those tickets, we're going to lose money, and we can't afford to pay for people's bums on seats as much as we would want to, and that's frustrating. So in my professional life, we get funding and we give accessible activity and barrier-free entry to activities, and provide hot meals for young people from people living in the care system, people from low-income families. We work with unaccompanied minors, so migrants, and politics aside, I think if you've got a kid who is in a foreign country, doesn't speak the language, and they're on their own, I don't care what your politics are, that child needs looking after.
Yeah.
There's a lot to be said about the wider, boats and things, which I won't even begin to touch upon, but if there is a child who is on their own, they need looking after. They don't care. So we do a lot of work on that, and we've been fortunate enough to get a lot of funding for that. And I think in the world of theatre, you're right about the gatekeeping, and I think there's an element of... well, it was hard for me, so it's got to be hard for you as well. It's rather than, it was hard for me, so I'm going to make it easier for you, because I remember how hard it was. Like, no, we had to do it, so you... And it sounds like you're kind of on the same page there. Like, well, yeah, it is really hard, so how to make it easier? Because all of these kids want to be involved in acting, want to be involved in the theatre.
I mean, when we talk about it, it's not just kids. It's anyone that wants to tell stories can by virtue of being a human being.
Yes.
We are storytellers. We've been doing it since the cavemen days. Like, you know, and to stop anybody having the opportunity to get better at telling stories and by virtue getting to know themselves better. I mean, whatever your opinions are, I believe that the arts touches on so many problems in our society, but one massive one, there's a reason why people with mental health difficulties are attracted to the arts. Like I you know, it sounds like a joke, but it's not. But in the same breath, it's also the industry as it is at the moment, and the way that the arts are done is also one of the biggest reasons why if you have a mental health difficulty, you shouldn't go into it. I mean, like, let's just take the practices for one. The one thing you shouldn't do if you're a person suffering with an anxiety disorder is keep on asking what if. And Stanislavski literally tells you to ask what if. You're surrounded by dramatic events and traumatic events in the theatre all the time in the stories. By osmosis, it's vicarious trauma. You're gonna start to perceive your life as more dramatic than it needs to be. And I think that there is not enough. There are not enough safe spaces in which to explore creativity and your own artistry. And I don't necessarily just mean for kids or for adults interested in the arts, but I think everybody could afford to play more, and in every industry, and to think creatively. It doesn't need to be a sector, it should be a part of life.
And that's a really interesting point. And just you're mentioning the word play there, and that isn't play in the sense of being on stage and doing a play. It is doing something recreational for fun. And I think it's a bit of an aside, but a bugbear for me in the society that we live in at the moment is that requirement to monetize your hobbies, and you can't just have any free headspace to do anything because everything costs so much money. The world we live in is so expensive. For someone who is working a minimum wage job or even a little bit above a minimum wage job, the thought of home ownership is impossible. The thought of having enough money to pay your bills, or if you lost your job, surviving another month it's a very scary place we live in. And the world of, well, you've got two parents, one of them works on a building site, the other one works in a supermarket part-time, and you have a couple of holidays a year and a nice car and a mortgage. That's not the world we live in.
Yeah.
The example, look at The Simpsons. The Simpsons have got a lovely house, and that was regarded as normal in 1989. No, that was that massive house with Homer having a job and never going to university. Marge doesn't work. 2 kids, nice car. So even in coming up with this podcast, this concept, I've done a lot of research into podcasting and how you set things up and microphones and lights and all this kind of stuff. And every other video is how to get 1 million subscribers, how to get people to listen to you, how to monetize your podcast. I'm like, oh wait, I don't necessarily want to monetize. I just want to make the thing and have some fun making it. And everything is side hustle, side hustle, side hustle, side hustle. And I think that's unhelpful and unhealthy because you're like, well, it's hypocritical because we've got 2 people sat here who have both looked at ways of monetizing their hobby and things they love. But some people just want to come and play. I just want to come do a show. I just want to come do a play. I just want to, like, for me, maybe someone wants to come and do some acrobatics or some gymnastics or just want to learn some stage combat. How are you going to monetize that? How is this going to be? No. I'm quite interested in it. I just want to do that. Yeah. And there's not a lot of space for that. And social media, particularly YouTube and the likes, are, if you're interested in something, everything being thrown at you is how you can monetize that thing. Because the person telling you to monetize it is trying to monetize them teaching you what they're doing. Like, buy my course on how to monetize your podcast. No, I just want to make a podcast because it's fun.
But also, even if you are thinking about the money side of it, the monetizing it, I believe we're getting in the wrong direction. Don't watch a video on how to monetize your hobby. Do your hobby well. Have integrity in what you do, and watch it grow. I had a conversation with my head of course at Bristol Old Vic at the very end of the course, and he said, is there anything you want to ask me now, or is there anything you're concerned about going into the industry? And I said, I really, really hate the idea of networking. It is not for me, I don't like it, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, at best you're kissing someone's bum. At worst, no one's really listening to each other. Everyone's just there to sort of serve themselves. And he said something to me that's kind of stuck with me, which is that, first of all, he's quite a shy and retiring person, but had a very prolific career, and he goes, "Do you reckon I love networking, Rich?" And I was like, "No." And he goes, "What would you tell me to do then if I came to you with the same problem?" And I said, "I'd tell you to just do your work and do your work well and enjoy it and wait for people to notice." And he agreed. Like, doing it, I'm call it naive, call it ignorant, whatever. I believe that if you have integrity in what you do, the right people that you'll want to work with will notice. The right people that you want to attract to it, and the money that comes in hand with that, will recognise work that is not being made to make money, work that is being made to be good work and to be good art.
Yeah. And on that, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. I think too many people go into something and want to monetize it immediately. And some of that might come out of, oh my God, I've got no money, I need to make money on this thing. And some of that comes out of, oh, I've got this, I just want to start making money straight away, and that's the focus. And I would agree with you. I think the focus should be doing your thing as well as you can.
Yeah.
And then there are ways you can potentially monetize that, and maybe you can look at massaging that part of it down the line. But do what you do and do what you do well. I'm gonna massage your ego a little bit now. So recently you started doing some acting classes, and they've been really successful. And from people within and people without, I hear Richard's acting classes are brilliant. People are enjoying it. People are getting some benefit out of it. Therefore, you've grown your community. And not that I would suggest that is your you're not looking to monetize said community, but you've got a group of people who trust you because you're delivering a great product to them. They're enjoying, they feel safe, they feel part of something. If you started making wax melts on Etsy, you've got a whole bunch of people that would buy them. Now, that's not the monetization I'd suggest, but that's what you really have to build. You want a community, and you want authenticity, and you want people to trust you. And then if you discover something really cool, like, oh, let's go on an acting retreat to this awesome place in France, let's go there. They'll go, yeah, actually, well, Richard knows what he's talking about. I would really enjoy a £1,000 weekend in France to do an acting course. Whereas if you just put an advert online 6 months ago, they'd be like, no, I'm not going to France with this weirdo. Yeah. So you've built up trust in a community, and therefore, if you keep that integrity, and you can then sell additional products to those that can afford it. If you've got that baseline of, I have acting classes every week which you can come to, but actually we've got a small group stage combat course.
Yeah.
Which is a little bit more expensive. It's going to be 3 days, and then you can come to that. But there's no requirement for everyone to come to that. They can still be part of your thing, and they can still be part of Richard's acting classes. But if they want to do the extra thing, there's some extra monetization there because you're adding extra value to it. And if they wanted one-to-one sessions with you, and then you can charge a little bit more of a premium for that. But they know and they trust you, and you're getting additional income out of those people without milking them for money. It's not about the monetization. You have to survive. And those that can afford to spend a little bit more can spend a little bit more, and those that can't afford to spend a little bit more don't. But the monetization of a community is a model that people are using on YouTube and Instagram, and that is the influencer model, isn't it? Which is why it's terrible and awful and everything that's wrong with the world. So someone does lots of squats in booty shorts and grows a fitness influencer Instagram account with several thousand thirsty men, and then sells, the worst end of it, they're selling OnlyFans subscriptions, and the best end of it, they're selling t-shirts and bags and water bottles. But they'll shift lots and lots of material because they're monetizing their following. And I think that's a good way of delivering something of value to your community if it's done right, and it's an awful way of ripping off and sucking the life out of people who want to be part of your world at the worst end of it. And I think it's the management of that. And I think if you've got a community people feel part of, which you have, then giving them extra value, and those that can afford to spend a little bit more do, and those that can't have still got that accessible ground level entry. And certainly in my world, we sell premium products, which then subsidize the bottom end of it, so that we don't really need to make any money on the entry level thing, so that it can be as accessible as possible, because those that have got a little bit more money are paying for the premium product, and that balances itself out.
Similarly, something that we've just decided to do with the adult acting classes is we have regular socials. Like we have an after show party at the end of every 5-week blocks where all the classes can meet each other. But I was sat down with a few of them having a drink, and they said to me that I wasn't charging enough. And I said I wanted to be accessible. And they said, well, why don't you do what several cafes do, which is a pay it forward? So if you go into Patch Cafe you can pay for a latte, pop it on the board, and someone else can have it. And they said, why not offer that in terms of places on your adult acting classes? So if somebody wants to, if somebody's feeling particularly philanthropic, they can pay for 2 places, have one, and the other goes to someone who can't do it. And several of them said that they would do that. So that is something that I'm exploring now, by way of making it accessible as well. Not to mention the fact that, we talk about community, and I'm only able to do this because the Headgates had my back my entire life since I was 8 years old. Like, they've supported me in every endeavour I've wanted to do, and they're not out to milk money out of me, and that's where I hire to do the spaces. So I pass that on. Like, it's provided I have 5 people in the room, I've covered costs. Happy days. I like my classes to be about 15 to 18 people because I don't want it to be too many, because then you dilute what they're getting. But yeah, I'm brand new to business, to be honest, and it's taken off a lot quicker than I thought it would. But
it's hard. I'm not inherently good at business, and I feel you're probably in the same sort of area, because you do what you do because you want to do it and you want other people to do it and enjoy it. You're not doing it because you want to milk every last red cent out of the people that are coming to your classes.
Yeah.
And that's great. And unfortunately, we live in a world where you have to sometimes be a bit cutthroat, and that's so hard to try and maintain your integrity while existing in a world that requires you. Like, my landlord put our rent up by 20% on a very expensive building. Like, I can't possibly put my prices up by 20% to my customers because they can't afford that.
Yeah.
And my hirers, a dance school that uses our studio, I can't put theirs up by 20% because that'll put them out of business. Whereas the landlord's like, well, that's the nature of the business. Yeah. And I'm now, that buffer between the landlord wanting more money and not being able to put my price up to my customers by that much. And pay it forward is excellent. I'm actually going to steal that. I'm going to have that. We're going to do that because I think that's such a fantastic idea that those that can pay do, and those that can't are okay as a result.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've been chatting about all sorts of... This has been fascinating. And just bring it back to the important thing, because networking isn't a lot of fun, but the 5 people that are going to listen to this might be interested in your acting classes. So where can we find out more information about Richard Bland, about your acting classes, about how to get involved, what's next, what is it you want to do? So pitch to me. Tell me what you got going on.
So the adult acting classes, you can book onto those either through the Headgate Theatre or through my website, which is richardblanddirector.com. Or you can follow me on social media, richardbland_director. It's richardbland_director on Instagram. I run 3 classes in Colchester. We're looking at expanding those to Brentwood, Ipswich, Manningtree, Woodbridge. And in terms of future projects coming up, I am directing a brand new piece of writing in London called A Murder of Crows later on this year, and I'm directing a production of Educating Rita at the Headgate Theatre in May. Tickets will go on sale for that at the start of April.
Have you completely cast that yet?
Completely cast it, yeah.
Man, I saw the stuff come out. I was like, oh, Emily's playing Rita. That's going to be great.
Yeah. That one came totally by chance. I moved back to Colchester, didn't have a job, didn't have any... I didn't have a clue what I was going to do next, and I'd never met Glenn before, Glenn Granger, who was playing Frank. And he took me out for a coffee and said, I want to put on this show. Will you direct it? And I was like, yep. I'm a director now. Awesome, cool. I'll do that. Yeah. So he already had several things in mind of how to do that. But we're doing it at the Headgates. We're looking at doing it at Brentwood Theatre as well, possibly taking it to a few other theatres.
Nice. And you do also do online courses. I've seen you've done some online clients for one-to-one acting.
Yeah, so I do one-to-ones either in person or over Zoom. Zoom is cheaper because obviously there's less we can do. But I've helped people with self-tapes. I've helped people prepare for roles. I've helped people with accent work. I've helped... I'd say the most people I help is 16 to 19-year-olds, 20, 21-year-olds who want to go to drama school, going through pieces, helping with piece selection as well, helping with UCAS. I spent 2 years as a personal progress tutor at Suffolk One, so got personal statements and references on my jam. Okay. It's... but at the crux of what I do, I want people to realise how much potential they have. And I love it. I love seeing people do things they never thought they could possibly do. I like to remove blocks and make offers to, whether it be actors or just people or students or whatever else, make offers that make them think about something in a different way, perhaps think laterally, and use creativity and play to achieve things they never thought they could but always wanted to.
That's awesome. That's a soundbite right there. Okay, and then bigger picture. Like, what's the Richard Bland empire? Where are we at in 10, 15, 20 years?
I have a million different sort of ideas for things I'd like to do, but I mean, one thing we were talking about mental health and the theatre earlier on. One thing I'm trying to do more now than ever is live in the moment and go wherever the stream takes me. A lot of my personal anxieties come from dread for the future, so I try not to hill climb anymore, try to put one foot in front of the other. But things I'm exploring, improvisation, starting an improv club in Colchester with Gary Turner, an improv group.
Who's going to be sat on that couch tomorrow?
Absolutely. He was someone I met by chance. I mean, this... I'm going off another tangent now, but when I first moved back to Colchester, I literally put a post on the Essex Theatre Artists Network just saying I want to meet as many creatives as possible. And then I went for coffee after coffee after coffee, and since coming back here, I had no idea how many artists there were in Colchester and how what they do. And things have sprung up from that. So I want to keep on following the... wherever this takes me. But another thing I'm really interested to do is site-specific theatre, get that going in Essex, finding interesting locations and building a piece around that. Playing, basically. I want to get in a room with people and play, and develop an interesting, exciting piece of theatre from that. I mean, another thing I do is dramaturgy. I'm a dramaturg, so... And actually, that's an exciting thing that's come about from these acting classes. I'd say about half of them are also playwrights, although they would never call themselves playwrights, because they're people who write things, and they're like, oh, that'll never be any good. And I call it Marty McFly syndrome. Like, what if it's no good? So I'm like, yeah, but what if it is good?
Yeah.
Like, it sounds like a great concept. And I said, you may well be like me, in that I can't sit in front of a laptop and write, because it's just not how I am. But if I have an idea, and I have a room full of actors, and have questions to ask... that's when we create exciting, living theatre. That's what I want to do. I guess, above all else, I want to create new theatre with artists who think that they can't.
And that's awesome. And giving anyone, I often refer to young people, but actually it's not, because there are so many people out there that want to be creative, that want to play and don't know how, or feel that they can't. And because we've got that in some aspects of the community, that gatekeeping aspect, they might go along and try out for a drama thing and be told, oh, well, you can't act, so you can't come here. It's like,
yeah.
No, but I'm here to learn to act.
Well, not to mention the fact that who is the arbiter of who can act and who can't? And there are certain people who will say that you can't teach acting as well. It's just something I'm like, said every lazy teacher in the world.
Yes, and this is a massive gift, a massive lesson that I learned. So my stepfather passed away in 2017, and he was the biggest influence in my life. And as a lot of my character and a lot of my morals and my values come from him. Incredible man. But there's one thing that he was absolutely categorically wrong about, and that was he was a big believer in natural talent. He's like, some things you're just going to be good at, and some things you're just not going to be good at. And I, having learned to do things that I was told as a child that I wasn't very good at, and things that he would have never nurtured me in, so specifically using tools and being a builder and those kind of things that I was never very good at. I'm never particularly dexterous with a set of tools.
Yeah.
Well, I'm renovating a house and I built my entire workplace because I had to. I couldn't afford builders. So I've had to, and I've had to learn those skills. Singing. As a child, I couldn't sing. I still wouldn't say I'm a very good singer, but I've been on stage and I've sung and I've hit the right notes at the right time. And I...
In the right order?
In the right order,
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
for the most part. And I now absolutely, firmly believe that every single human being has the capacity to learn anything they want.
Yeah.
You just need the space to learn it, the right teacher, and the time. You've just got to give it time. That becoming an expert in 100,000 hours or 10,000 hours.
Yeah.
And it's not just practicing, otherwise every single taxi driver would be a Formula One driver.
Yeah.
It's the right kind of practice. Practice makes permanent. That's it. So I'm with you on that. I am absolutely a firm believer that if you want to learn something, you can, and you're going to need someone to facilitate that.
Yeah.
You could sit there and watch YouTube videos till you're blue in the face, but if you're practicing wrong or you're not guided the right way, you're not going to get any better. So I'm with you 100% on that.
Even if you are a natural talent at something, that is at most 5% of what it needs to be. You need to be practicing. You need to be. I mean, both with accents and improv, I'd say, and Shakespeare are the ones I get most. That I say we're going to do any of those three things, and amongst the nervous groans and laughter, there is also, oh, I can't, I'm no good at that. And I'm like, you saying that is essentially me going up to horse riding lessons and going, oh, I'm no good at that. Yeah. Like, well, of course I'm not. I've never sat on a horse. Yeah. Do you know how I get better at horse riding? Riding the horse. And there's your soundbite.
Excellent. Well, I think we've prattled on for long enough. So once again, just give us your socials, and we'll put them in the links somewhere.
Cool. So I'm not on Twitter, X, whatever you call it. Good. But I'm on Instagram, Richard Bland _ director. You can also follow Stagecraft on Instagram as well. I'm on Facebook. Just search Richard Bland, you'll find me. And yeah, for any adult acting classes or one-to-ones or just a coffee and a chat and find out what you do, please do get in touch. I want to meet everyone.
And website once again is
richardblanddirector.com.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Richard.
Thank
Fascinating.
you.
I'm really looking forward to reading through and looking through this, and that's my afternoon sorted. Thank you so much.
Thank you.